And I asked him the question through the translator. I said, what is the force that holds the universe together? We had already had the conversation that there is something out there. What is it that holds the universe together? What connects everything in the universe? And he had a conversation with the translator, and then he answered me with one word. He said, compassion. And I said, well, wait a minute. I thought that compassion is a feeling, an experience that we have in our bodies and our hearts. I'm asking you, what is the force that holds everything together? And he answered me again. He said, compassion. And I said, well, is it an experience or is it a force? And he said, yes, it is both. And to me, that is so powerful because it reminds us that we are born into this world with a power in our hearts that we already have, that we don't have to learn. It's already there. And it's a power that aligns us with the framework, with the matrix of the universe itself, as Max Planck called this field of energy, the matrix, in 1944. He coined the term, the matrix, to describe this network of energy that holds particles of the universe together. And from the Buddhist perspective, the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, they recognize that the experience of compassion, it's not just feeling sorry for someone or saying, oh, poor person, you know, they're having a bad day. In Western traditions, sometimes people think of compassion as that way. And that may be a part of it. But from the Buddhist perspective, it's much deeper than that. It is living life awake and conscious and present in our hearts in the moment, knowing that we are part of all that is, and that what we do every moment of life is affecting not only us, it's affecting the other side of the universe, and consciously living our lives respecting and honoring that relationship. And it's such a beautiful way to live. Now that scientists have been able to show us through the imagery of the Chandra X-ray Space Observatory, the mission of this observatory was to detect invisible fields of energy in the universe. So while scientists have always suspected that up to 90% of the universe, they say, is empty, and this observatory now is showing us that in the space that we once believed was empty, it's not empty. There's a lot of energy in there, and it looks like a web or a net of energy. And it is the compassion in our hearts that creates the waves, the belief waves of electrical and magnetic energy that align us with this field. This is our technical, Western, male-dominated, schematically oriented, scientific way of describing, and it sounds very complex. The Buddhist monk, the abbot, he says compassion, and he says the same thing. And they have always known this. And this is where it's so fascinating to me, because science is a language. And it is only one language that describes our world and our relationship to the world. There are other languages. And science is a relatively new language. It's only about 400 years old. Other languages are 7,000 years old in the case of the Vedas. So science is good, however, it's incomplete. And we know that science does not have all of the complete answers. So when we go into the other traditions to see how they describe our relationship to the universe, in some ways they're much more complete. So Western science now, modern science, is only arriving in the last years of the 20th century and early 21st century. They have just arrived at the understanding that the field is out there, and they're saying, what do we do with this field? On the one hand, and on the other hand, this is the place where the ancient traditions have always begun. Science has spent 400 years debating and trying to prove whether or not everything is connected, while these ancient traditions began with the understanding that of course everything is connected. They didn't spend 400 years proving the connection. Their 400 years was used exploring how we may use that connection to become better people and create a better world. And for me, as a scientist, this is the value of looking into our most ancient and cherished traditions, honoring our past. Don't throw it out the window, honor it, and marry that wisdom with the best science of today. And together they create a greater wisdom than either would give us individually. And I think that we need that wisdom now at this time in history to solve the problems that we see in our lives. So the question then that the scientist asks is, if we know the experiences work, if we know that when one person or a group of people come together and they share a common experience in their heart for a period of time, such as the International Peace Project in the Middle East, where people came together to feel the feelings of peace during the Lebanese-Israeli War in the early 1980s. During the time they created those feelings, statistically, terrorist activities dropped to zero, crimes against people declined, emergency hospital room visits declined, traffic accidents declined. And so the scientists ask, if this prayer is so powerful, then why didn't it last? And this is the crux, the secret of the ancient traditions that has been missed by so many people today. Because this experience in our heart was viewed by the scientist as something you do for a moment in time. So you go about your daily life, and at a certain time, you stop your daily life and you do this heart experience, this prayer. And when the prayer is over, you stop the prayer and go back to your life. And the crux of our most cherished, sacred, and ancient traditions is very clear that this experience of the heart is not something that we do. It is something that we become. It is something that we live in our lives. Life becomes the prayer. Every moment of every day is the prayer. And because this modality of prayer, it's called the lost mode of prayer, feeling-based prayer, because the prayer is based in a feeling, and we can have a feeling all the time. We can have a feeling in our cars, driving on the highway. We can have a feeling in the office, in the school, with our families, alone in the park. We can always have a feeling, and that means we can always be in prayer. But it's not something that we do in a moment. It's a way of living. It's a way of life. It's something that we become. And when we do that, the prayer never ends. And that is the secret to maintaining the powerful effects that are documented by science and at the ancient texts. The ancient Essenes tell us in their texts 2,500 years ago, very precise language, that every human lives in this earth in three worlds at the same time. We live in the world of thought, the world of feeling, and the world of emotion. And their texts actually say to us, when these three become one, when the thought and the feeling and the emotion are merged, are married together into a single potent force, then when you say to the mountain, move, the mountain will move. Now, I used to believe that this was a metaphor. And now I have seen in the monasteries of Tibet, and I've seen with the holy and the sacred people in Bolivia and Peru, in the native traditions of the desert Southwest, in the medicineless hospitals in Beijing, China, this is not a metaphor. It is a literal fact. When thought, feeling, and emotion become one, we literally can change the stuff our world is made of. We can rearrange the atoms of matter through the belief waves that emanate from our heart. So the question is, when we are experiencing judgment and ego, what is that saying to us really? Well, the first thing it's telling us is that we are not in our heart, because the heart has no judgment and the heart has no ego. When we are experiencing those qualities, it is coming from our mind. It's coming from our inner child. It's coming from our fear, from our families, our perceptions, our conditioning. It's not coming from our heart. And this is so interesting to me because I'm using the English language now. And in the English language, the language is not designed for this conversation. Other languages are. Sanskrit, for example, ancient Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, there is one word that means the energy body of the human, for example. It is prana. In English, there is no single word for prana, so we have to take other words, put them together. Energy body, or electrical magnetic field, or something like that. And the same is true when we speak about the language of the heart. There is no word in the English language that describes the language of the heart. Part of my heritage is Southeastern Cherokee. And in that tradition, there is a word that means the single eye of the heart that doesn't see right and wrong and good and bad. It simply sees what has happened with no judgment. And that word is shante ishta, the single eye of the heart. And so the goal of many ancient traditions, early Christian, early Jewish, early Buddhist, Native American, and now the scientific principles today, is to find a way to view the experiences of life, what happens in the world around us, our relationships, our finances, our health, through the single eye of the heart, the eye that says, yes, this is what has happened, without saying what has happened is good or bad or right or wrong. And when we find ourselves having those experiences, we are in our mind. And it is the marriage of the mind and the heart give us the power to create. And the way they say to transcend, to get through the judgment that we find ourselves in, it sounds strange at first. But what they invite us to do is this. When something hurts us in life, when something crosses our path that causes us pain, our first reaction is to move away from it, to say, I don't want that. And that is when the judgment comes in. If we can embrace the experiences when someone or an experience hurts us in life, not that we like the experience or we want to have it again, but the ancients say that we should bless the experience. And this sounds very strange, to bless the things that hurt you. But here's what happens. When we begin to bless the things that cause us the pain, the blessing is simply the acknowledgement. When you say, I bless the person who has just been dishonest with me. I bless the person who has violated my trust, betrayed my confidence. And you say that again and again, and you say it out loud. What begins to happen is the verbal expression brings the physical energy up from the heart into the body. And soon your body becomes warm and you have tears in your eyes and you say, I bless this person, I bless this person. And it is the blessing that relieves the charge of the judgment for just a moment. And that's all we need. Because for just a moment, when the charge is relieved, we can replace the hurt with something else. And the ancients say that that something else is what we call beauty. Beauty is a powerful force in our world. And it already exists everywhere. The ancient Essenes and the Native Americans alike. They say that beauty is already everywhere in everything. Our job is to find that beauty, to seek it out. Now, Mother Teresa was a master at this. She would walk down the streets of Calcutta, India, and she would see dead bodies on the street and decay in the gutters. And in the dung in the gutter of the streets in Calcutta, she would find a flower growing, and in that flower she would find beauty in the streets. And that experience allowed her the strength to find even more beauty in life. So rather than judging the experiences, when they come to us, if we can look at each experience as a blessing, and when we find ourselves hurt, say, again, yes, I feel hurt, so acknowledge it first. Secondly, what is this hurt saying to me? What voice am I hearing? What does it tell me about my life? And bless the hurt now that is giving us information about ourselves. As we begin that experience, it is much easier then for our thoughts, feelings, and emotions to become one so that we can move that mountain when it comes across our paths.